You will know I'm not a natural scientist because I will read, because I will not show slides. A list of problems to be addressed to cope with the inherent instability of Gaia. Some people will certainly see and have a proof that Gaia hypothesis made 15 years ago by James Lovelock is not a well-established scientific discovery in the very fact that someone like me, without any of the right scientific credential, has been asked to speak at the start of our meeting. And yet, if Tim Lenton has asked so many different people from so many different disciplines to participate in this centenary celebration about Gaia, it's because there is, I believe, an inherent instability in Gaia. And this is why it might not be completely odd to have someone from the social sciences and the humanities talk to you. In the humanity, as you know, we are very good at ambiguities, instability, unsettled, and when there is not enough of it, we add some. There is clearly an instability in Gaia taken as a phenomenon. First, because Gaia is a historical entity with a constantly moving set of events, and it has historicity, as we say in our jargon. And second, because the discussions about Gaia have emerged in the much disputed epoch of the Anthropocene, another kind of world I'm not going to talk about. Whenever Gaia, the phenomenon, is brought in, it immediately related to long-term history and short-term emergency. Mentioning Gaia, I'm sure you have the experience, is always raising an alarm, hence a double source of instability. But there is also an inherent instability in Gaia as a concept. Many of us here have written, which is very amusing, books about Gaia. But if we were spending 2 weeks together, secluded in this room, to find a definitive, undisputable, and shared definition of what we mean by Gaia, it's fairly clear to me that we will not be able to do so. Am I wrong on that? We will see. I remember the videos at the end of the London Science Museum about Lovelock. There was an exhibition a few years ago. Each of the videos had a completely different and contradictory message about what Gaia was and meant. In Sébastien Dutreuil's extensive historical reconstruction of Gaia discovery and reception, there are about 5 different threads: theory, hypothesis, philosophy of science, worldview, research program, in order to follow the way Gaia has spread or has been interrupted. So many of you, I'm sure, faced with such a confusion, have resorted to what I call a strategy of selection and sorting. I've done it a lot myself. So you say, well, my Gaia is the Gaia of Lovelock's first book. We just heard it. Not what happened after that. Or Gaia is really one other name for Earth system science, or forget about the mythological name, this, what I call a poisonous gift given by Golding, and use it an acronym. I tried that, like a GAIA, Geophysical Agent Integrated Analysis. I'm sure it would have been much better for Gaia. Or Gaia is a strictly scientific notion. Okay, we tried everything to circumvent what we like in Gaia and rejected the rest. But the rest keeps popping up. Nonetheless, we have to accept that no concept invented during the Holocene is immediately usable to describe an Anthropocene concept. If a strategy of selection and sorting has failed, it's because I propose to say that the instability of a concept, of a phenomenon, is built in. Gaia is historically a sui generis entity. Sui generis as a phenomenon, of course, it has made itself in the course of Earth history, and sui generis in its discovery in the course of the last half century. It's a new entity, which has in fact no real predecessor. As Isabel Stengers, one of the first philosophers to take up the challenge of facing Gaia, seriously said, Gaia is an intruder. It comes crashing in. It cannot be tamed. It's an intrusion. This is why I found myself at liberty when I began to inquire about Lovelock's work to develop the parallel with Galileo and the scientific revolution. The Galileo moment and the controversy that it triggers is the best template to understand how come artists, astronomers, theologians, politicians, engineers, industrialists, and citizens were taken for the same frenzy by the discovery of a moving Earth at the time. And now again, another moving Earth, another frenzy, but this time the moving Earth is for good. And another cosmological rearrangement of, I think, similar magnitude. And I don't think my parallel is in any way contrived, even though I dramatize a little bit. If you compare to the dramatic effect of the intrusion of Gaia, you cannot never dramatize enough a situation. Because of its powers of intrusion, I think we should accept that Gaia has a capacity of gathering and attracting different and contradictory people and discipline, which is inversely proportionate with its powers of convincing the establishment, so to speak, or at least with its ability to be integrated in the canon of science. It's very interesting. It gathers a lot of people, but it's not actually, we had an example this morning, which was quite interesting. Last Friday, the celebration of Jim Lovelock's 100th birthday was a good illustration of its inverse relation. 200 people were attending, moved, and their life and scientific worldview transformed, but none of the speeches mentioned this or that technical aspect of Gaia as their main source of interest or emotion. This doesn't mean people talked about psychology or spirituality. No, but they integrated the technical aspect into something else. And this something has intruded into their life, and that is still puzzling them. And I think puzzling all of us here. I guess there is a certain powers of attraction and conversion that changes everything without people exactly able to declare what it is. So the inherent instability of Gaia as a phenomenon and Gaia as a concept is replicated and vastly expanded by the instability of a reception of Gaia by each of the members of this audience and the public at large. I certainly think the same. I don't think facing Gaia, you can face Gaia and get out of it immune. I think there is something which is too strong here. That's what intruders do. They crash in, they terrify, they direct attention and attract everything in their wake. And we are the ones who try to cope with this triple source of uncertainty. Is this an honest description of the audience today or not? If I'm right, then the best way to honor the invitation of the Exeter team, which has set up this little experiment, I hope you know we are part of a little experiment from the globalization, is not to continue the first strategy, my Gaia is the right thing and your Gaia really stinks, but to embrace the second one by accepting the triple instability and answering the following question. Question 1. Why is it that the intrusion of Gaia crashes through so many questions at once in so many domains? Question 2. Can we make the list of the most obvious site in which the Gaia attractor distorts everything? And once the list is made, question 3, can we domesticate the intruder in a way that is less traumatic? And that's, of course, what Tim Lenton did by using the expression 2.0, as if the problem was solved, as if we knew anything about Gaia 1.0. But that's a clever move. It says, well, the problem is solved, now you guys, you solve it. So in the few remaining minutes, I want to start the list, and of this, my list, and you will add. First, the Gaia hypothesis is the greatest way to debunk and criticize the notion of global scale. I think something which is not understood well enough. And this because it's simultaneously concerned by disturbing the two extreme points of the biggest and of the smallest. This is how I came to Lovelock from actor network theory. Here was a way to generate the biggest atmosphere, acidity of the ocean, etc., temperature, through the smallest agency, mainly bacteria for most of the long-term history of the Earth. That's where the connection between Margulis and Lovelock is so essential and so radical. Both have contested scales and built a completely different path to generate differences of scale without the Russian doll model used usually in model building and especially, of course, in social science. For Gaia is even more networky than the extremely confusing notion of society I've criticized for many years. A key feature for Gaia 2.0, because we need to know in which sort of collective we are going to be. There is one Gaia, but Gaia is not one, as we saw from a beautiful slide of that Tim presented a minute ago. Gaia, the second point, Gaia has come crashing in biology, and to an extraordinary degree from the beginning. Even though biologists, especially Darwinists at first, behave as if their notion of biology could be sort of adjusted to the novelty of Gaia, it's not the case. It's a nice case, actually, of trying to put old, new wine into old skins. Margulis at the cell level and Lovelock at the planetary level are requesting a redefinition of what life means and what the self means. This is why the Earth is alive, the search provocation of Lovelock, is very misleading as long as we don't define, or we define, what alive means. And others are much better placed than me to develop this item of this. But it's really a very key question for our understanding of Gaia 2.0, because it's at the heart of the notion of agency. The third item in my list is intentionality, our goal function, the point that Tim just mentioned. And of course, it's a can of worms. The most provoking element in Lovelock's thesis has been the proposition, as you know, that life has a goal in the sense that it works to protect its own continuing habitability and keep it maintaining it against perturbation over aeons of time. Of course, the provocation was badly understood at first, because scientists of a Galilean mode believe that mechanistic explanation requires no goal function at all. And we had forgotten that mechanistic philosophy had been invented earlier by theologians to describe how God rules the world and made it, that is, as an engineer. So if you drop God and you transformed it into a blind watchmaker, it's blind for sure, but it's still a maker. And the point that is never understood in Lovelock is that it's because it's not mechanistic that it's less providentially oriented than other theory. It's because it's not mechanistic, but it's less providentially oriented. This is a source of a misunderstanding with the biologists, and including, of course, with the neo-Darwinian account of evolution through the fully providential agency of natural selection. Sorry to say that in England. I know you should never criticize Darwin, but Gaia is a secular entity. It's another parallel with Galileo, which interests me a lot. It's another definition of secular. This is a key question for Gaia 2.0, because it's not the case that with the advent of the Anthropocene, human consciousness will finally take over the task of directing evolution. This is why I criticize the brain that Tim showed on that. Suddenly the brain arrives in various directions. This would be an extraordinary, arrogant idea. Evolution has always directed itself. That's what sui generis means. And the situation is not that smart humans are ruling finally over dead stuff, but that smart agents, including bacteria, are deeply perturbed by dumb humans. Here again, all the questions of intention, goal, value, prediction are thrown in the pot. Holocene-trained humans are on average extraordinarily ill-prepared to be able to master anything, especially a planet. This is the famous quote by Lovelock about the goat, that he would never imagine humans to be a good mastering the planet, no more than a goat will be a good gardener. I forgot exactly the quote. This leads, of course, to the next big question on my list, namely that of Gaia as a new form of body politic. The reason I'm so interested in the ability of a concept of Gaia to attract so many different people with totally different views without really integrating them into a unanimous whole of any sort is that this is exactly what we expect from a new form of polity. I've largely developed this argument in Facing Gaia, and I build a parallel between Gaia and Hobbes's Leviathan. But Gaia is clearly not nature as it was conceived in earlier time. It's much more explicitly political than this ancient counterpart of politics. In terms of legal reasoning, because there is a legal dimension in Gaia, it has a totally original sort of presence. Not to say authority. I mean, doesn't Gaia weigh on us in some sort of sense? Sovereignty, maybe one term. But of course, many people and all of us who have been trained into another geopolitical, geohistorical epoch have difficulty registering this. The parallel with ancient civilization or contemporary non-industrial society, of course, has a lot of appeal, but the appeal remains superficial because no collective, no ethnic of any sort, no nation state had to absorb something like the intrusion of Gaia in the Anthropocene. In the foreseeable future, we will live inside a new political entity. It has no institutional constitution of any sort. And that's another source of instability. Well, the list could go on, but in the few minutes left, I still have two. Let me try two of them. And one might not be so important for this audience, except one or two of them, which I think is crucial, which is how Gaia came crashing into religion, especially Christian religion. It's Christianity that has constantly preached for apocalyptic dimension and appealed to the novus ordo secularum, the new earth. It's a constant theme of Christianity. I'm now not simply speaking of a typically English obsession with natural religion, but with a more basic question having to do with our earthly condition. In dogmatic terms, it means something like this. What is the meaning of the incarnation and the whole Christian dispensation if the respective attraction of the up, the heaven, and the down, earth, is subverted? Some of you may know the gospel saying, what does it mean to gain the whole world if you lose your soul? It's a famous quote from the gospel. But what is the new saying in the Anthropocene if it were reasoning like this? What does it mean to gain your soul if you lose your earth? And Gaia 2.0, for lots of reasons, needs the power of religious souls. They have the energy. But it's a major shift for them to set their sight on earth and not on heaven. Here again, transcendence sticks. And for the second time, this is why it's so important, since the scientific revolution, Christian religion has to react to a new definition of secularity. I mean, what it is to be absorb the secularity of sui generis. I promise this is the last item. Another key element is what Gaia does to the arts. As our hosts have made clear in their program, art is part and parcel of the meeting. And they are right, for a reason directly related to Gaia's ambiguity. A pleasant reader of my book, Down to Earth, proposed to say that it requires not a lot of soul searching, but a lot of soil searching. And that's exactly the problem we have to tackle when confronting Gaia's request. A whole civilization, let's call it industrial or capitalism, doesn't matter, lift itself in a place of no place, literally a utopia, and suddenly realize it has to land somewhere without crashing. And this sudden search for a land to inhabit durably, that is what we mean by the domestication of Gaia, or Gaia 2.0, requires a whole set of new forms of emotion and sensibility. That is the ability to sense and to respond, what is called aesthetics. And it's a topic which we will discuss, of course, a lot in a lot of sessions here. Well, I've said enough to show that the intrusion of Gaia leaves nothing intact. But we are, in a way, fortunate to have to face such an intrusion. And that is a great honor for all of us, and for me, to have been invited by the Exeter team to test our luck in responding to Gaia's challenge. Thank you very much.